For decades, the British royal family operated under a simple assumption: when the monarch spoke, the final decision belonged to the crown. But everything changed the moment a sealed testament from the Queen surfaced and the royal court confirmed its authority. Suddenly, the rules of inheritance shifted overnight, and most shocking of all, the ruling made one thing brutally clear: even King Charles himself could not override the Queen's final wishes regarding the royal children's inheritance. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a quiet legal disclosure quickly escalated into one of the most extraordinary constitutional moments the royal household had faced in decades. Behind palace gates, senior aides moved with unusual urgency as confirmation spread that the Queen's final testament had been formally recognized by the royal court as legally binding. This was not merely a ceremonial document or a symbolic gesture left behind by a departing monarch. According to legal advisors close to the palace, the testament carried explicit instructions, clear, deliberate, and fortified with legal protections that left almost no room for reinterpretation, and the implications were immediate. For the first time in modern royal memory, the authority of a reigning monarch appeared to be directly limited by the documented wishes of the previous sovereign. The announcement itself arrived with startling simplicity. The royal court confirmed that the Queen's testament had been examined, validated, and officially sealed as final. No revisions could be made, no reinterpretations would be permitted. The wording alone sent a ripple of disbelief through royal corridors. The document did not merely outline personal bequests or ceremonial inheritances. Instead, it established protected inheritance rights for royal children and grandchildren assets, estates, trusts, and legacies that could not be altered by future royal discretion. In practical terms, that meant that even King Charles, now seated on the throne, could not intervene in the distribution of these inheritances. The decision had already been made, and it had been made long before the world ever knew such a document existed. Inside the palace, the response was anything but calm. Advisors who had spent their careers navigating the delicate balance between tradition and authority suddenly found themselves confronting a legal reality few had anticipated. The monarchy had always operated on a careful blend of custom, hierarchy, and discretion. Yet the Queen's testament introduced something far more rigid: legal permanence. Those who had reviewed the document described it as unusually precise. Every clause had been drafted with the foresight of someone who understood exactly how royal power might shift after her reign ended. The protections for the younger generation were not vague promises or symbolic gestures. They were locked into law. Speculation began almost instantly. Which heirs had been protected? Which estates had been secured? Which fortunes had been shielded from alteration? The questions spread quickly beyond palace walls. Royal commentators and historians found themselves revisiting decades of family dynamics, wondering whether the Queen had anticipated conflicts that the public had never fully seen. If the testament had been written to protect the royal children's inheritance rights so aggressively, then it suggested something deeper, a quiet concern about what might happen once the next era of the monarchy began. And that possibility introduced a tension no royal advisor could ignore. Because if the Queen had taken such extraordinary steps to ensure that these inheritances remained untouched, then she must have believed there was a genuine risk they might one day be challenged. Within private meetings inside the palace, legal teams began carefully reviewing the boundaries of the ruling. The answer they reached was both simple and unsettling. The Queen's testament was absolute. The authority of the throne itself could not undo it. For King Charles, this realization created a delicate and deeply personal dilemma. On one hand, the monarchy depended on continuity and respect for the decisions of past sovereigns. On the other, the discovery meant that certain royal assets, once assumed to remain under the discretion of the reigning monarch, were now permanently placed beyond his control. The crown remained powerful, but in this case, the Queen had ensured that her final word would endure. What made the situation even more remarkable was the timing. The confirmation arrived at a moment when the monarchy was already navigating a period of transition and uncertainty. Public attention was intensely focused on the future generation of royals, particularly the younger heirs whose roles in the institution were still evolving. Now, with the testament officially validated, their financial and legal security had been guaranteed in a way that no monarch could reverse. But perhaps the most unsettling realization was that none of this had happened suddenly. The testament had not been written in haste. Every line suggested careful preparation, quiet consultation, and deliberate planning that had unfolded years earlier, long before the court ever announced its ruling. And that meant the Queen had been thinking about this moment for a very long time. Yet while the announcement stunned the world, few people knew that the seeds of this royal confrontation had been planted years earlier, inside a quiet meeting the Queen held long before her final days. Long before the royal court ever confirmed the Queen's testament, whispers circulated about a private gathering that took place behind palace walls. It was a meeting so secret that only a handful of trusted figures were present, and during that meeting, the Queen reportedly made a decision that would alter the balance of power within the royal family forever. The revelation that such a meeting had taken place only added another layer of mystery to an already explosive situation. In the days following the royal court's confirmation, palace insiders began quietly revisiting memories of conversations that once seemed routine, but now appeared far more significant. According to those familiar with the royal household's inner workings, the Queen had called for a confidential discussion years earlier, one that did not follow the usual pattern of ceremonial briefings or constitutional updates. Instead, the gathering brought together a small group of senior legal advisors whose expertise lay not in public governance, but in private, royal estates, inheritance law, and the delicate intersection between monarchy and legal permanence. Those invited reportedly understood the gravity of the moment almost immediately. The Queen, known for her calm composure and measured words, did not approach the subject casually. She spoke with unusual directness about the future of the monarchy, not merely the public institution, but the family behind it. For decades, she had witnessed the pressures placed upon royal heirs, the shifting loyalties, the public scrutiny, and the quiet rivalries that sometimes formed beneath the polished image of unity. What concerned her most, according to accounts that later surfaced, was the vulnerability of the next generation. The royal children and grandchildren, she believed, would inherit not only titles, but enormous expectations and responsibilities. And if disputes over wealth or estates ever emerged, those young heirs could easily find themselves caught in conflicts they never created. This fear, it seems, was what drove the Queen to consider a measure that few monarchs had ever attempted. Rather than leaving inheritance decisions to future discretion as tradition often allowed, she wanted something stronger, something legally unshakable. During the meeting, advisors reportedly presented the potential consequences of such an action. If the Queen drafted a testament that was fortified beyond challenge, it could protect specific inheritances indefinitely. Yet there was a complication. By making those protections absolute, the document could limit the authority of whoever inherited the throne next. In practical terms, the future king might find certain royal assets permanently beyond his reach. For many leaders, that warning might have been enough to reconsider, but according to individuals familiar with the conversation, the Queen did not hesitate. In fact, the warning seemed only to reinforce her resolve. The monarchy, she believed, had survived for centuries because it evolved carefully and protected its continuity above all else. If safeguarding the younger generation required redefining how royal inheritance worked, then that was a price she was willing to accept. Her advisors understood immediately that she was not merely exploring possibilities, she had already made her decision. What followed was an intricate process of drafting and refining language that would withstand every conceivable legal challenge. Every clause had to be precise, every word had to remove ambiguity. The testament was structured so that no future monarch, no matter how powerful, could reinterpret its meaning. It would stand as written, protected by both legal precedent and constitutional authority. Some advisors reportedly expressed concern about how such a document might be received once revealed. They warned that limiting the authority of the next king could spark tension inside the royal family, but the Queen remained firm. Her reasoning, according to those present, was disarmingly simple. The monarchy's strength lay not in one individual, but in the continuity of generations. The children represented the future of the crown, and their security, financial and symbolic, had to be guaranteed beyond question. If that meant challenging long-standing assumptions about royal control over estates and inheritances, then so be it. In one quiet moment during the discussion, when advisors pressed again about the consequences, the Queen reportedly offered the words that would shape the entire document. The children must be protected. Once the meeting concluded, the details disappeared into the careful secrecy that surrounds royal legal affairs. No announcements were made, no rumors escaped the palace with enough clarity to attract serious attention. The testament itself remained sealed, known to a small circle of legal custodians, sworn to absolute discretion. To the outside world, nothing appeared to have changed. The monarchy continued its public duties, and the Queen maintained her steady presence as the unshakable figure at its center. Yet behind that quiet surface, the future had already been written. Years would pass before anyone outside that inner circle understood what had happened inside that room. The testament would remain hidden, waiting for the moment when its existence could no longer remain secret. And when that moment finally arrived, when the royal court confirmed its authority and the world learned that the Queen's final instructions could not be overridden, it would become clear that the balance of power inside the royal family had been altered long ago. But the true significance of that meeting would remain hidden for years, until the moment King Charles first learned exactly what his mother had written into the document. When King Charles finally saw the full contents of the Queen's testament, palace sources say the room fell completely silent. Hidden among the carefully written legal language was a clause so powerful it effectively removed his ability to alter the inheritance rights of the royal children. In one stroke of the pen, the Queen had reshaped the monarchy's internal balance of power. The moment arrived quietly, far from public attention, inside a confidential briefing that had been arranged with almost surgical precision. By that point, the royal court had already acknowledged the existence of the document, but the full implications had not yet been laid out before the king himself. Senior legal advisors gathered with a seriousness that immediately signaled the gravity of the discussion. For King Charles, this was not merely another constitutional briefing or ceremonial matter of state. This was personal. The testament before him had been written by his mother, a monarch whose authority had shaped the modern monarchy for generations. As the document was presented, the tone inside the room reportedly shifted from routine formality to something heavier, almost uncertain. The legal team began explaining the structure of the testament, moving carefully through its language clause by clause. At first, the document appeared to follow familiar patterns, provisions outlining estates, family inheritances, trusts, and long-standing royal assets. Yet as the explanation continued, it became increasingly clear that this was no ordinary testament. The Queen had constructed the document with remarkable precision, layering legal safeguards around the inheritance rights of the royal children and grandchildren. Then came the clause that changed everything. According to insiders familiar with the briefing, the king paused as the legal advisors described the section in detail. The clause stated that specific inheritances, properties, financial trusts, and legacy holdings tied to the next generation were permanently protected. These allocations were not subject to reinterpretation, redistribution, or royal discretion. Once confirmed by the royal court, they would remain fixed regardless of who sat on the throne. It was a structure designed to eliminate uncertainty entirely. For a monarch accustomed to the quiet authority of royal tradition, the implications were impossible to ignore. Throughout history, the reigning sovereign had maintained broad influence over how certain royal estates and family assets were managed. Those decisions were often guided by precedent and family consensus, but the final authority traditionally rested with the crown. Yet here, written in careful legal language by the Queen herself, was a clause that removed that authority in one crucial area. The inheritance rights of the younger generation had been locked into place beyond alteration. Charles reportedly asked a simple question: whether the document allowed any flexibility. The response from legal advisors was measured but unmistakable. The testament had been deliberately fortified to prevent exactly that. Every possible avenue for modification had been addressed during its drafting. Even the monarch could not override its terms without triggering a legal challenge that would likely escalate into a constitutional crisis. The weight of that reality settled over the room. For Charles, the discovery carried both political and deeply personal consequences. On one level, it represented a legal constraint that no reigning monarch had expected to face. On another, it reflected the final decision of his mother, a woman whose judgment he had respected throughout his life, even when their perspectives occasionally differed. The testament was not written in anger or rebellion. It was written with calculated purpose. Yet the emotional tension surrounding the revelation could not be ignored. Reports from inside the palace suggested that the discovery sparked immediate conversations among senior members of the royal household. Some viewed the testament as a brilliant act of foresight, ensuring stability for the next generation. Others quietly questioned why the Queen had felt the need to protect those inheritances so firmly in the first place. If such protections were necessary, it suggested that she had anticipated future disagreements about royal wealth and influence. Advisors also made it clear to the king that attempting to challenge the clause would carry enormous risks. Any legal effort to overturn the testament would inevitably draw public scrutiny, inviting debate about the monarchy's internal conflicts. The royal institution had always thrived on continuity and unity, and a public dispute over inheritance could fracture that image in ways no one could predict. Faced with that reality, Charles found himself standing at a crossroads that very few monarchs had ever encountered. He could accept the testament as the Queen intended, honoring her final instructions, even if it meant surrendering a measure of royal authority. Or he could attempt to contest it, potentially igniting a legal and constitutional confrontation that might reshape the monarchy's public standing. But as he continued reading through the document, another realization slowly began to emerge. The testament was not simply about dividing estates or distributing wealth. Its language carried a deeper purpose, one that extended beyond financial arrangements. The Queen had written this document with a very specific vision of the monarchy's future and heirs who would inherit it. Yet the deeper Charles examined the document, the clearer it became that the Queen's testament wasn't simply about inheritance, it was about protecting specific heirs. At first glance, the Queen's testament seemed like a standard royal inheritance document, but hidden within its pages was a remarkable pattern. Nearly every key clause revolved around safeguarding the financial and property rights of royal children and future heirs. It was as if the Queen had designed the document specifically to secure their futures. The more carefully the testament was studied, the more deliberate that pattern appeared. What initially looked like ordinary provisions began to reveal something far more strategic. The Queen had not simply distributed wealth or assigned symbolic family heirlooms. Instead, she had constructed a network of protections that revolved almost entirely around the younger generation of the royal family. Multiple royal children and grandchildren were named within carefully structured legal frameworks, their inheritances defined with precision that left little room for uncertainty. Estates, financial trusts, and even historically significant properties were attached directly to their futures, not as temporary gifts, but as secured legacies that would remain beyond the reach of later alteration. Within palace circles, this realization carried enormous weight. For centuries, royal estates and family fortunes had often been shaped by the discretion of the reigning monarch. Each new sovereign possessed the authority to reinterpret certain arrangements, adjust distributions, or restructure holdings according to evolving circumstances. Yet the Queen's testament quietly dismantled that tradition in one critical area. By embedding legal safeguards around the younger heirs, she ensured that their inheritances would remain untouched, regardless of future decisions made at the top of the royal hierarchy. The message was unmistakable. The next generation would not have to negotiate their place within the monarchy's financial structure. Their security had already been decided. For the younger royals themselves, the implications were profound. Though they were raised within a world defined by privilege and expectation, their positions had never been completely immune to internal shifts in royal dynamics. History had shown that fortunes, estates, and responsibilities could change depending on the priorities of each reigning monarch. The Queen's testament effectively removed that uncertainty. Certain estates were now reserved exclusively for them, protected by clauses that prevented redistribution. Trust funds connected to royal heritage had been fortified with strict conditions, ensuring that their benefits could not be redirected elsewhere. Yet the deeper significance of these protections went beyond wealth alone. Royal assets often carry symbolic power as well as financial value. Estates represent continuity, historical memory, and the enduring presence of the monarchy across generations. By assigning these resources directly to younger heirs, the Queen was doing more than distributing property. She was anchoring the future identity of the royal family to those who would one day inherit its responsibilities. The children were not simply beneficiaries. They were the living extension of the institution she had spent her entire life protecting. Within the palace, however, this carefully crafted arrangement also raised difficult questions. Some advisors quietly admired the foresight embedded within the testament. They saw it as a masterstroke of long-term planning, a way to ensure that the monarchy's future leaders would never face financial vulnerability or internal competition over essential assets. Others were less certain. They wondered why the Queen had felt compelled to create such an unbreakable structure in the first place. After all, monarchs had traditionally trusted their successors to manage the family's legacy responsibly. But the testament suggested that the Queen had anticipated something different. Her decision to shield the younger generation so thoroughly implied that she believed future circumstances might become unpredictable. Perhaps she had sensed the subtle tensions that had occasionally surfaced within the royal household over the years. Perhaps she understood that the pressures of modern monarchy, public scrutiny, shifting loyalties, and evolving expectations could create conflicts no previous era had experienced. Whatever her reasoning, the document left no doubt about her priority. The stability of the next generation came first. As legal analysts and palace insiders examined the testament more closely, they began to recognize the extraordinary foresight behind its design. The Queen had essentially created a safeguard that would protect the monarchy's youngest heirs from internal disputes long after her reign had ended. Their inheritances were not only secure, but immune to political maneuvering within the family. It was a solution that carried both reassurance and mystery, because while the protections themselves were undeniable, the motivation behind them remained harder to explain. Why had the Queen gone to such length? What concerns had convinced her that these heirs needed such powerful legal guarantees? As the implications spread throughout the palace, one question began to dominate every private conversation. Why did the Queen feel the need to protect these inheritances so aggressively? Behind the polished image of royal unity, tensions within the royal family had been quietly building for years. Disagreements over roles, influence, and the future direction of the monarchy had created subtle fractures inside the palace. Some insiders now believe the Queen's testament was her way of preventing those fractures from turning into full-blown battles over inheritance. To the outside world, the royal family had always projected an image of careful harmony. Public appearances were measured, words were chosen with precision, and disagreements rarely surfaced beyond the palace walls. Yet those who worked closest to the institution understood that behind the ceremonial calm existed a complicated web of personalities and ambitions and expectations. The monarchy was not simply a symbol, it was a family navigating enormous power, wealth, and scrutiny. And like any family placed under such pressure, tensions sometimes formed in quiet corners long before the public ever sensed them. Over time, small disagreements began to grow more complicated. Questions emerged about roles within the evolving monarchy: who would represent the crown in future decades, who would hold influence behind the scenes, and who would ultimately shape the institution's direction. These discussions were rarely explosive. They unfolded gradually through private conversations, subtle disagreements about responsibilities, and occasional moments of strained diplomacy among senior members of the family. Yet advisors close to the Queen reportedly noticed something concerning. The deeper issue beneath many of these conversations often circled back to control over royal estates, resources, and the financial structures that supported the monarchy's long-term stability. Royal estates had always carried enormous significance within the family. They were not merely properties or investments. They represented heritage, power, and continuity. Control over them meant influence over the future direction of the institution itself. As different branches of the family began to consider their roles in the monarchy's next chapter, discussions about these assets occasionally became more delicate than anyone expected. According to individuals familiar with internal briefings during the later years of the Queen's reign, Advisors had quietly raised concerns about the possibility of future inheritance disputes, not because open conflict had erupted, but because the conditions for disagreement already existed. Generations were shifting, younger heirs were growing into public prominence, and the monarchy itself was navigating a period of transition unlike any it had experienced in modern times. If disagreements about estates or financial legacies ever intensified, they could easily fracture the carefully balanced unity that the royal institution depended upon. For the Queen, whose entire reign had been built upon stability and continuity, that possibility may have been deeply troubling. She had witnessed enough moments of royal difficulty throughout her decades on the throne to understand how fragile family harmony could become when questions of power and legacy entered the conversation. It was not merely a matter of money. It was about preserving trust within a family whose public image relied on unwavering solidarity. This context began to give the testament a new meaning. Rather than a simple act of generosity toward the younger generation, the document now appeared to function as a protective shield. By fixing inheritance rights permanently into law, the Queen had removed the very issue that could one day spark serious internal disputes. Estates and trusts that might have become points of negotiation were now locked into place. The possibility of redistribution, once a potential source of tension, had simply been eliminated. Not everyone inside the royal household reportedly welcomed the arrangement with quiet acceptance. While many understood the Queen's intention to safeguard the institution, whispers of frustration began to circulate among certain circles. Some believed that the testament limited flexibility for future monarchs who might need to adapt royal finances to changing circumstances. Others quietly wondered whether the Queen's decision signaled a lack of confidence in how future generations might handle those responsibilities. Yet despite those murmurs, one fact remained undeniable. The Queen's authority still carried enormous weight, even beyond her reign. By placing her testament under the protection of the royal court, she ensured that her final decision would stand above personal disagreements. In effect, she had used her final act of leadership to shape the monarchy's internal stability long after she was gone. For the royal family, that decision created an emotional reckoning that could not easily be avoided. Loyalty to the crown had always been the guiding principle of the institution. But now the crown itself was bound by the last directive of the monarch, who had ruled longer than any other in modern history. The Queen's testament had become more than a legal instrument. It was a statement about the future of the monarchy and the responsibilities carried by those who inherited it. And as palace advisors continued examining the implications of that decision, a new and even more startling realization began to emerge. Because while internal tensions might explain why the Queen had taken such precautions, the true power of the testament lay in something even more extraordinary. But the situation became even more dramatic when legal experts confirmed that the Queen's testament could not be challenged, not even by the reigning monarch. The moment the royal court issued its confirmation, the palace knew there would be no turning back. The Queen's testament was declared legally binding, immune to alter, ration, and protected by constitutional precedent. In other words, the monarchy itself had just been forced to accept the final authority of a document written before the current king even took the throne. The announcement did not arrive as speculation or rumor. It came as a formal legal declaration, calculated, deliberate, and impossible to reinterpret. For weeks, quiet discussions had unfolded among senior legal authorities who were tasked with reviewing the structure of the Queen's testament. Every clause had been examined, every provision weighed against centuries of constitutional precedent. What they discovered was something extraordinary. The document had been drafted with a level of precision rarely seen even in royal legal frameworks. It anticipated challenges before they could be raised and reinforced its own authority through layers of legal reinforcement that made it almost untouchable. When the royal court finally concluded its review, the verdict was unmistakable. The testament stood on solid constitutional ground. Its provisions were not symbolic wishes or personal preferences. They were binding instructions embedded within a legal structure that could not be undone by ordinary royal authority. Judges reviewing the document reportedly found no ambiguity in its language. The Queen had made her intentions unmistakably clear. The inheritance rights of specific royal heirs had been protected by clauses that could not be revised, redirected, or overridden by future decisions of the Crown. The ruling carried immediate consequences inside the palace. Once the court's confirmation was delivered, King Charles was formally informed that the testament's authority had been sealed. Advisors explained the decision with careful diplomacy, but the reality was unavoidable. The court's interpretation meant that the monarch himself was bound by the document's provisions. Faux are an institution built upon centuries of hierarchical authority. The symbolism was powerful. The Queen's final decree had effectively become law within the royal family. News of the ruling spread quickly through royal circles. Senior members of the household recognized that this was more than a legal technicality. It was a historic moment in the evolution of the monarchy's internal governance. The Queen's testament had not only distributed inheritance rights, but had also redefined the limits of royal discretion in ways that few had anticipated. The crown remained the centerpiece of the monarchy. Yet in this instance, the authority of the reigning king had been carefully restricted by the foresight of his predecessor. Legal experts who analyzed the ruling were equally astonished by its implications. Many emphasized that the court's confirmation did not weaken the monarchy but rather reinforced its constitutional integrity. By honoring the testament as binding law, the royal court had upheld the principle that royal decisions once formally established within legal frameworks could endure beyond the reign of the monarch who issued them. The Queen's final act of leadership had therefore achieved something remarkable. It ensured that her intentions would remain protected, regardless of who ruled after her. Public reaction soon followed. As details of the court's confirmation became known, interest in the testament intensified across the world. Commentators, historians, and royal observers began examining every available fragment of information in an effort to understand the deeper meaning behind the document. Why had the Queen gone to such extraordinary lengths to secure the inheritance rights of the younger generation? What had she anticipated that others had not yet seen? Within the palace, those questions carried an even deeper weight. Because while the court's ruling had settled the legal matter once and for all, it had also illuminated the remarkable influence the Queen continued to hold, even after her reign had ended. Her testament had become a lasting instrument of power, shaping the monarchy's internal structure long after she had stepped away from the throne. For King Charles and the rest of the royal household, the reality was now unavoidable. The Queen's final decision had been validated by the highest legal authority available to the monarchy. The testament would stand exactly as it had been written, its clauses intact, its protections permanent. And yet, as the world absorbed the magnitude of that ruling, another realization began to take shape, one that reached far beyond inheritance alone. Because if the Queen had designed the testament to secure the future of certain heirs, then the document might hold consequences far more significant than anyone had first imagined. Yet, as the public digested the ruling, another stunning realization emerged. This testament might shape the future leadership of the monarchy itself. What initially appeared to be an inheritance dispute quickly evolved into something much larger. By securing the financial independence of royal heirs, the Queen's testament may have altered the monarchy's future power dynamics entirely. Some observers now believe the document was carefully designed to strengthen the next generation's position within the royal system. As the implications of the royal court's ruling settled into the public conversation, a deeper understanding of the testament began to emerge. What had first been framed as a dramatic legal constraint on the reigning monarch slowly revealed itself as something far more strategic. The Queen had not simply resolved a question of inheritance, she had quietly reshaped the balance of influence within the royal family itself. By protecting key estates, trust, and financial holdings for the younger generation, she ensured that the monarchy's future heirs would not begin their roles dependent on the discretion of the current king. That shift, subtle but undeniable, carried enormous consequences for how the monarchy might function in the years ahead. Royal children who once would have waited decades to gain control over resources tied to their future responsibilities now possessed something unprecedented: financial autonomy that was guaranteed by law. Their inheritances were not merely promises tied to tradition. They were secured foundations that could support their roles as public figures, leaders of charitable institutions, and eventual guardians of the monarchy's reputation. For many observers, this was the moment when the Queen's deeper vision began to come into focus. She had spent a lifetime watching the institution evolve through political change, social upheaval, and intense public scrutiny. She understood that future monarchs would face pressures unlike anything previous generations had experienced. By giving the younger heirs independent financial security, she may have been ensuring that they would be able to serve the monarchy with greater confidence and resilience. They would not have to rely entirely on the decisions of the reigning sovereign to support their roles. Instead, they would stand on foundations she had personally secured. Inside the palace, this new reality sparked quiet discussions about how the royal structure itself might gradually shift. Advisors began considering the long-term consequences of a monarchy in which future leaders possessed stronger personal resources and independence from the traditional financial hierarchy. The crown would still command authority, but influence might no longer flow in a single direction. Instead, the next generation could emerge as powerful contributors to the institution's direction, supported by assets that were permanently tied to their roles. This possibility subtly changed the atmosphere surrounding the testament. What once appeared to be a limitation on King Charles's authority began to look more like a carefully designed framework for the monarchy's future stability. By distributing strength across generations rather than concentrating it solely at the top, the Queen had potentially created a system capable of adapting to modern expectations. The younger royals would carry the monarchy forward, supported by the resources needed to maintain both tradition and relevance. Public perception also began to evolve as these interpretations gained attention. For years, discussions about the monarchy often centered on its ability to remain meaningful in an increasingly modern world. The Queen's testament now appeared to answer that challenge in a uniquely personal way. Instead of relying on symbolic reforms, she had built structural protection into the very heart of the royal family. Her final act of leadership was not simply about preserving wealth, it was about safeguarding the future generation who would inherit the crown's responsibilities. At the center of this transformation stood the Queen's legacy. Throughout her reign, she had been seen as the steady figure who guided the monarchy through turbulent decades. Now, even after her passing, her influence continued shaping the institution in ways no one had fully anticipated. The testament ensured that the younger generation would inherit more than titles and expectations. They would inherit stability, security, and a carefully prepared path into the monarchy's next era. Yet as historians, legal experts, and royal advisors continued examining the document, they realized that the story might not end with financial independence alone. Hidden within the testament structure were hints of something even more deliberate, something that suggested the Queen had left behind one final message about how the monarchy should evolve. But as analysts studied the testament more closely, they began to uncover one final detail, an unexpected clause that may hold the most powerful message of all. Buried deep within the final pages of the Queen's testament lies a clause that few people initially noticed. Yet once legal experts examined it closely, its meaning became unmistakable. The Queen had not only protected the children's inheritance, she had also ensured that those protections would endure far beyond her lifetime. At first, the clause appeared almost ordinary, hidden within the dense legal language that filled the closing sections of the document. But as analysts began reviewing the text more carefully, the implications slowly revealed themselves. The Queen had not simply written a testament that distributed estates and financial assets. She had constructed a legal safeguard designed to outlast every future monarch who might sit upon the throne. This final provision made one point absolutely clear: the inheritance rights she established for the younger generations were not temporary arrangements, subject to revision. They were permanent. For legal scholars accustomed to interpreting royal documents, the discovery was astonishing. Most royal wills and private testaments, even those belonging to monarchs, allow room for reinterpretation by future sovereigns. Circumstances change. Political realities evolve. New monarchs often adjust family arrangements to reflect their own priorities. Yet this document left no such opening. The Queen had embedded language that closed every possible avenue for alteration. Future monarchs would not be able to modify the structure she had created, not through royal decree, not through administrative adjustments, and certainly not through personal preference. In effect, the Queen had anchored the inheritance of the next generation directly into the legal fabric surrounding the monarchy. The estates and financial resources protected by her testament would remain tied to those heirs, no matter how the royal family's internal dynamics evolved. This was not merely foresight. It was a deliberate act of strategic permanence. The Queen had anticipated the possibility of change and chosen to remove uncertainty entirely. What made the clause even more remarkable was the subtlety with which it had been written. It did not appear as a dramatic proclamation or a sweeping declaration. Instead, it functioned as a quiet reinforcement of everything that had come before it. Each earlier provision protecting royal children and grandchildren was effectively locked into place by this final instruction. The structure became self-sustaining once the royal court confirmed the testament. The entire arrangement became immune to future interference. To many observers, this clause revealed the full scope of the Queen's long-term vision. She had spent decades guiding the monarchy through moments of crisis, reform, and reinvention. Few leaders understood better than she did how quickly circumstances could change once a new era began. By ensuring that the inheritance rights of younger heirs would remain untouched for generations, she was protecting not just individual fortunes, but the institutional stability of the royal family itself. The implications stretched far beyond the immediate moment. Financial security has always played a quiet but critical role in the monarchy's survival. Royal heirs must support charities, represent the crown internationally, and maintain the traditions that connect the institution to the public. By tying essential resources directly to the future generation, the Queen had ensured that those responsibilities would always be supported. The monarchy's next leaders would not inherit uncertainty. They would inherit a foundation. Historians quickly began recognizing the testament as one of the most carefully engineered royal documents in modern history. It blended family legacy with constitutional awareness, creating a legal structure that balanced authority with continuity. Even those who once questioned the Queen's motives began acknowledging the brilliance of the design. By removing inheritance from future disputes, she had quietly prevented the kind of internal battles that could fracture the monarchy's unity for decades. In the years ahead, the testament would likely become a subject of intense historical analysis. Scholars would examine its clauses as examples of strategic leadership, while royal observers would debate the moment it permanently reshaped the monarchy's internal structure. Yet beyond the legal language and constitutional impact lay something more personal, a final expression of the Queen's belief that the institution she served for so long must always protect its future generations. And with that final clause revealed, the testament transformed from a simple inheritance document into something far greater, a lasting declaration of stability, foresight, and authority that would echo through the monarchy long after the Queen herself was gone. And with the revelation of that final clause, the monarchy was left confronting a reality. No one could ignore the Queen's final decision would shape the royal family long after her reign had ended. In the end, the Queen's testament proved to be more than just a legal document. It became a final act of leadership. By securing the inheritance rights of the royal children and limiting the power of future monarchs to alter those decisions, she ensured that her vision for the monarchy would endure long after her passing. What began as a quiet legal confirmation gradually revealed itself as one of the most consequential decisions ever written within the royal institution. The testament was no longer simply a private family document hidden behind palace walls. It had become a milestone in royal history, a moment when a reigning monarch used the authority of her final words to shape the destiny of generations yet to come. In doing so, the Queen left behind something far more powerful than wealth or estates. She left behind a framework that would guide the monarchy long after her reign had ended. For King Charles, the reality of that framework is now unavoidable. As monarch, he carries the weight of tradition, expectation, and leadership. Yet, the testament created by his mother quietly reshaped the boundaries of that authority. Certain decisions that might once have rested within the power of the crown are now permanently defined by the Queen's final decree. It is not a limitation born from conflict, but rather a legacy of foresight. The institution he now leads must operate within a structure that she carefully constructed long before the throne passed to him. Within that structure lies the future of the royal family itself. The younger generation, those heirs whose inheritance rights were so carefully protected, now stand at the center of the monarchy's next chapter. They inherit more than land, trusts, and family wealth. they inherit responsibility. The resources secured in the Queen's testament are meant to support their roles as representatives of the Crown, guardians of its traditions, and symbols of continuity in a rapidly changing world. Their stability was not granted casually, it was designed. That design has already begun reshaping how historians and royal observers interpret the final years of the Queen's reign. For decades, she was admired as the steady presence who guided the monarchy through moments of triumph and crisis alike. But the testament adds a new dimension to that legacy. It reveals a leader who was not only protecting the institution in the present, but preparing it for challenges she might never personally witness. By securing the inheritance rights of the younger generation, she ensured that the monarchy's future would not depend on fragile negotiations or shifting internal alliances. Debate continues among scholars and royal analysts about the deeper implications of the document. Some argue that the testament may have quietly prevented conflicts that could have fractured the royal family in years to come. Without its protections, disputes over estates and financial power might have emerged as generations changed and new leaders stepped forward. Others believe the document represents a profound example of constitutional awareness, an understanding that the monarchy's survival depends not only on ceremony, but on careful planning for the future. Whatever interpretation history ultimately favors, one fact remains impossible to deny. The Queen's testament has already secured its place among the most significant royal acts ever revealed. It reshaped inheritance law within the monarchy, redefined the limits of royal discretion, and guaranteed that the next generation would inherit both stability and independence. In doing so, it transformed a private legal document into a defining moment in the evolution of the crown. And perhaps that is the most remarkable aspect of the story. The Queen did not deliver this decision through speeches or proclamations. She did not frame it as reform or revolution. Instead, she allowed the power of the written word to speak long after her voice was gone. Quietly, deliberately, she wrote a future that could not be undone. And as the palace adjusts to a future defined by the Queen's final deck, one truth now echoes through the halls of royal history. Sometimes the most powerful command a monarch can give is the one written for the generations who follow. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.